The Russian Revolution of 1917 overthrew the Russian monarchy and ushered in years of civil war between the revolutionary Bolshevik Reds and the anti-Bolshevik Whites who opposed the new communist regime. Amid this chaotic conflict, one of the most prominent leaders of the White movement was Admiral Alexander Kolchak, who briefly reigned as the supreme ruler of Russia from 1918 to 1920 before his eventual downfall. Kolchak's rise to power and his ultimate defeat provide a fascinating look at the tumultuous events surrounding the Russian Civil War. Early life and naval career. Alexander Vasilyevich Kolchak was born in 1874 in St. Petersburg into a noble family of the Russian Empire. He pursued a career in the Russian Imperial Navy, attending naval colleges and serving on ships in the Baltic and Black Sea fleets. During the Russo-Japanese War of 1904 to 1905, Kolchak distinguished himself as an exceptional navigator and polar explorer. He participated in the legendary Battle of Tsushima, surviving despite the devastating Russian defeat. After the war, Kolchak continued his Arctic exploration voyages, leading several scientific expeditions to study the region's geography and climate. His leadership and navigational skills earned him respect within Russia's naval community. When World War I broke out in 1914, Kolchak again served in the Baltic Fleet, overseeing minesweeping operations. By 1916, he had risen to the rank of Vice Admiral. The revolution and rise to power. The tumultuous events of 1917 permanently altered Kolchak's destiny. When the February Revolution toppled the Tsar that year, Kolchak was serving in the Black Sea. Initially expressing support for the Russian Provisional Government, he aimed to keep the Navy out of the revolution's political infighting. However, after the Bolshevik takeover in October 1917, Kolchak decisively sided against the new communist regime. In late 1917, Kolchak traveled to Siberia and joined the anti-Bolshevik White movement forming around the dispersed elements of the old imperial military forces. He became a leading figure in organizing White resistance in Siberia and played a key role in establishing the Provisional All-Russian Government in Omsk in 1918. As the White Russians achieved a series of victories against the Red Army that year, Kolchak's prestige and power grew. On November 18, 1918, Kolchak was proclaimed as the supreme ruler of Russia by the Whites, giving him full civil and military authority over their territories. Though his rule was never recognized internationally, for a time Kolchak commanded the allegiance of much of Siberia and parts of the Urals and European Russia. At its peak in the late 1919, Kolchak's regime controlled around 7 million people and 700,000 square miles of territory. Policies as supreme ruler. As supreme ruler, Kolchak declared himself committed to restoring the unified Russian state and acting as a strongman leader to stabilize the fractured nation. However, he aimed to restore a constitutional monarchy, not the autocracy of the czars. Kolchak championed the ideals of Russia one and indivisible while promising elections and a democratic parliament, though only after order was re-established by military means. Kolchak assembled a diverse cabinet of ministers including moderate socialists as well as conservatives and monarchists. Yet from the start, his regime faced immense challenges and opposition, even from within his own ranks. The White movement was plagued by poor coordination, infighting between factions and military leaders, and divergent political aims. While some elements wanted a return to the pre-1917 old order, others backed Kolchak's vision of a renewed Russia built on democratic republican principles. Governing was further complicated by economic woes, as the Civil War crippled industry, transport, and trade. Rampant inflation plagued Kolchak's realm, while bitter policy disputes erupted over issues like nationalization of industry, land reform, and the rights of minority ethnic groups. On the battlefields, the war against the Bolsheviks seesawed back and forth as the Red Army exhibited increasing skill and determination under figures like Leon Trotsky. Despite the many obstacles, Kolchak strived to project an image of legitimate statehood. He organized governmental departments, issued laws and decrees, and levied taxes. Unprecedented in Russian history, Kolchak even created a Ministry of Minorities headed by liberal democratic leaders who championed ethnic minority rights and self-governance within a federated Russia. Yet Kolchak often resorted to authoritarian tactics and censorship to maintain order in his domains. Political opponents were repressed and persecuted, while suspected Bolshevik sympathizers frequently faced imprisonment or execution. Though generally opposed to anti-Jewish pogroms, Kolchak failed to rein in atrocities committed by some White Army units against Jews and other ethnic minorities. Downfall and execution. For a time in late 1919, it appeared Kolchak's forces might reverse the revolutionary tide and capture Moscow itself. The White armies advanced steadily westward from Siberia, backed by the famed Cossack cavalry corps of Adam and Gregory Semenov. However, defeats on the battlefield combined with the economic and social turmoil within Kolchak's realm soon brought his regime crashing down. In late 1919, a combination of factors including overstretched supply lines, mass desertions, a typhus epidemic, and Red Army counteroffensives shattered Kolchak's front lines. By early 1920, the Red Armies had regained most of the territories once held by the White Russians. As the situation became hopeless, Kolchak's own ministers ousted and abandoned him. The deposed ruler fled in a railway car. According to historical accounts, on January 15, 1920, a train carrying Kolchak and his remaining entourage was surrounded by Red cavalry at a remote Siberian station. The former supreme ruler was captured and brought to the regional capital of Irkutsk. Despite pleas for leniency from some Bolshevik leaders, including Lenin himself, the local Irkutsk revolutionaries insisted on putting Kolchak on trial. In dramatic courtroom proceedings, Kolchak defended himself eloquently but was inevitably convicted of counter-revolutionary crimes by the Irkutsk military tribunal. Early on the morning of February 7, 1920, the 45-year-old admiral was executed by firing squad on the banks of the Ushakovka River, just east of Irkutsk. The execution of Admiral Kolchak marked the effective end of the White Russian resistance and the ultimate consolidation of Bolshevik power across the former Russian Empire. Though a failure in purely military terms, Kolchak's role as the supreme ruler nevertheless carried symbolic importance for the anti-Bolshevik cause and the vision of an alternative path for post-Tsarist Russia. Some historians argue that by proclaiming himself as supreme ruler and assembling the trappings of a sovereign government, Kolchak unintentionally lent legitimacy to the opposing Bolshevik regime in Moscow. The two rivals essentially mirrored each other by claiming to be Russia's true national authority, thus enabling the Bolsheviks to portray themselves as the legal defender of the Russian state against Kolchak's uprising. Critics also assailed Kolchak's frequent heavy-handed tactics against domestic dissent and questioned whether the supposedly reform-minded ruler differed greatly from the autocrats of old. Defenders countered that Kolchak resorted to such harshness only due to the brutal nature of the civil war and the need to swiftly restore order. In later years, Kolchak became a symbol and martyr for the anti-communist Russian émigré community around the world. Views of the man himself were mixed. Some praised the white leader's patriotism, intellect and determination, while others viewed him as ill-suited for supreme power or simply a tool of reactionary forces seeking to restore the old regime. In Russia itself, Kolchak and the White Movement were ignored or vilified during the Soviet era. Only in the late 1980s and 1990s did state censors permit a re-evaluation of this controversial figure. Today, some Russian nationalists hail Kolchak as a tragic hero battling for a united, nationalist Russia, in contrast to the internationalist Bolshevik ideology. Streets, monuments and museums have been dedicated to his memory in cities like Omsk and St. Petersburg.